So, of all the things that you could say about the Mediterranean, maybe the most profound is that it is one of the healthiest methods or styles of eating anywhere in the world. There's been a lot of studies that have proven that the Mediterranean diet is protective against all kinds of diseases. I'm going to do some cooking in this show that sort of underscores some of the strategies that you can use in Mediterranean cooking to really turn out great, healthy food. This first dish that I'm making is called fava. Fava with tomato-braised capers, and it begins in a pot with a little bit of olive oil. That's one of the keys to healthy Mediterranean food, is that while they consume somewhere around 40% of their calories from fat, that fat just happens to be olive oil, which is one of the healthiest fats on the face of the planet. A monounsaturated and protective against a lot of diseases. Anyhow, in goes the olive oil. And what I want to do is cook some onions and some garlic. I want to cook these long enough so that they lose their raw flavor. So what a lot of people would say is when the onions turn translucent and when the garlic is aromatic, that's long enough. Because these onions are cut up so small, that will go very, very quickly. As I said, this recipe is called fava with tomato-braised capers, and yet the bean that I'm going to be using is yellow split peas. The reason for that is that early on in the history of the Mediterranean, before the Americas were discovered, there were three beans that you could find in the Mediterranean. Fava beans were one of them, lentils another, and chickpeas or garbanzo beans the third. And of the three of them, fava was a pretty important bean. Now, in deference to that, when you make a bean puree, oftentimes it may be called fava, even if it's made from a different bean. So, these are translucent right now. I'm going to put all of these yellow split peas in. Just coat them with that flavorful fat, and then we're going to cover those with water. And we bring those to a boil, and I would say they need to cook for about an hour and a quarter. But really what we're trying to do is to get them to fall apart into a puree. Initially, they take almost no attention whatsoever. They come up to a boil, you reduce the heat to a simmer. And then, over time, they'll begin to break down and they'll absorb water, so you may need to add a little bit more. But as you get close to them being done, as they're starting to form a puree, I want you to be stingy with the water because you want a dry puree. Let me show you what I mean. Here are the yellow split peas that I cooked earlier, and you can see they're very, very dry. The significance of them being dry is that I want to puree them now, but then I want to enrich them with olive oil. And the drier they are, the more olive oil I can put in, and the more delicious they taste. So that's the idea. We will take these cooked split peas and put them right into the food processor. And we'll begin the process of pureeing those. Once this puree is done, I'm going to make a really simple topping for them. And I want to get that started so that we don't waste time. Tomato-braised capers is what the topping will be. And in a pan with olive oil, I'm going to sweat onions and garlic again. So this should be familiar to you already. So let's just let those cook. Now, back to the split peas. I'm going to puree them. And I'm also going to introduce a little bit of olive oil. Earlier I said you should be stingy with the water. The nice thing is that if you need to add more water, if it needs a little bit more liquid, you can add that certainly, but you can never take it out once it's left the pan. So I'm going to give it just a drop or two of water. And that puree is just about done. Meanwhile, over here with the topping. The onions are translucent. In goes tomatoes. These can be fresh or canned. And in goes capers. And I'm going to put in a little bit of thyme. And those vegetables are going to cook together. In effect, the capers are going to braise with tomatoes. At this point, I'm going to turn the temperature down a little bit lower, and we'll let them just simmer happily there on the stovetop. And I want to take some of this fava puree and just mound it here into the plate. You saw how much olive oil I put in there. It is fairly rich, still thick enough to kind of hold its shape, and I oftentimes shape it with a fork like this so it's a little craggy because I want it to capture all of the delicious capers that I'm busy cooking here. Maybe just a little bit more. Now, while we finish up with this, this is representative of one of the ideas that I think you should pay attention to in Mediterranean cuisine. If you look at the Mediterranean diet pyramid and you just pay attention to protein, at the base of the pyramid you see grains, and then you go up one level and you bump into legumes. In effect, what that pyramid tells you is that the primary source of protein is vegetable-based. And this is legumes, and the pita bread, or the pita chips, whole grain pita chips, represents grains. So this represents good quality protein from a vegetable source. If you were to follow the pyramid higher, you would bump into first seafood, and then you would bump into poultry, and those things are used less and less frequently. And the very tip of the Mediterranean pyramid is lean red meat. And that little tip of the pyramid represents 16 ounces of meat, not in a meal, not in a day, not in 2 days, not in 7 days or a week, but in a month. 16 ounces of lean red meat a month. And that is part of what makes people in the Mediterranean healthy, is how they get their protein. I'm going to add some herbs to this. And I have a little pile of basil that I'm going to roll up into a little cigar and cut what's called a chiffonade. A chiffonade is just little thin ribbons. This is the way to chop basil, because basil has enzymes in it that when they're exposed to air make the herb turn black. So this is the least invasive way of cutting basil into a little chiffonade like this. All right, so basil right in there. I'm sure that I don't need any salt because capers are plenty salty. A little bit of pepper. And the tomato-braised capers are spooned over. And the idea then is that when you scoop up some of the fava, you get the capers as well. And just a little bit more olive oil. There you have fava with tomato-braised capers. This dish really tells a story about healthy eating. This is vegetarian protein from the beginning to the end, but you don't have to worry about that. All you need to know is it's delicious. So, as an expression of Mediterranean cuisine, healthy Mediterranean cuisine, take a look at this spread right here. I'm going to point out a couple of things. Olives and olive oil as the primary fats, plenty of seasonal produce, a modest amount of fresh seafood, whole grains. This is really healthy eating. Well, what are we going to do to take all of this and turn it into delicious dishes? Well, I've got 3 different things here. I'm going to make a dish from North Africa, from Morocco, salmon tagine. And it's going to begin with a marinade that's going to go on that salmon. And I'll just knock it out here very, very quickly. It starts with parsley and cilantro, and that needs to get sliced and diced and minced. And so I'm going to make quick work of that. There's the stems, they go away. What I'm going to make here is known as charmula. And charmula is really nothing more than a very, very chunky vinaigrette with a lot of cilantro and parsley in it. I make it with olive oil and lemon juice. And we're going to use it the way they use it in Morocco as a marinade. You can also use it as a sauce or a salad dressing. It's really pervasive. All right, so there I have parsley and cilantro. And I'm going to add to that a little bit of cumin. I'm going to add some paprika and a little pinch or two of cayenne. I'm going to introduce some garlic into this charmula. And then finally, olive oil and lemon juice. And the proportion is about 3 parts oil to 1 part lemon juice. So we'll mix this all up and season it with salt. There's cayenne in there already, so I don't think we need that. And what I want to do is take this fish, this is a wild salmon, and we're going to lay that directly into the marinade. And I want to coat the fish in that marinade. Traditionally, this was probably done as a preservation technique. So if you don't have refrigeration, you could put this marinade on the fish and it would keep very well until you got around to cooking it for your next meal. All right, so that looks good. We're going to cook this fish on a bed of vegetables. And I've got some of the vegetables already prepared here. Let me get the rest of them done. I've got some fennel sliced and some onions sliced. I'm going to slice some celery here. Slice it very, very thin because we want these vegetables to cook at the same rate that the fish cooks. That ought to be enough. So in goes some fennel. In goes some sliced onion. In goes the celery. I'm going to add some tomato to this as well. And the tomatoes don't need to be peeled or seeded. I'm just going to cut the core out and dice them up and add them. At another time of the year, we might be using canned tomatoes, but these are beautiful this time of the year. So I'm going to dice those up. Done deal. Now, an interesting ingredient, and I'll show you how to make this in just a second, but what I have here is preserved lemon. In cultures that for religious reasons don't consume alcohol, you will not have vinegar because vinegar is the result of alcohol spoiling. So how do you make your food sour without vinegar? Well, lemon comes to mind, but lemon is a seasonal product. And so they found in the Eastern Mediterranean and North Africa both a technique of preserving lemon by soaking it in a salt brine. I'm going to add some preserved lemon to this mix, and I want to cut it very, very fine. What I'm cutting is actually the rind of the lemon, and it's no longer chalky white. It's sort of translucent. It's salty, but it has a wonderful lemon flavor and none of the bitterness that you associate with lemon rind. That has been soaked out of it. And then finally, I'm going to put some garlic in this mix. All right, this vegetable bed that is here in the pan just needs to be mixed up. And as the name suggests, this is a bed for something. It's a bed for our salmon to sleep in. I'm going to add some capers to this mix. And I have some caper berries right here. Caper berries and capers are related. If you liken capers and the caper bush to a rose, if you were to pickle a rose bud, that would be what a caper is. If you don't pickle it, the bud would open into a blossom, and after the blossom, you would see a seed head or a hip. And if you were to harvest that and pickle it, that's what a caperberry is. So I've got some caperberries here already sliced in half. If you can't find caperberries, but you have capers in your refrigerator, that's fine. You can use them interchangeably. Now, our fish needs to go right on top of that bed. And all of the goodness that is in that charmula needs to be added to the pan. So when this cooks, the vegetables will cook, the fish will cook and lend its savor to the vegetables below, and I'm going to create a little bit of a sauce by adding some other ingredients in here. I want to put some saffron in here, water soaked in saffron, or saffron soaked in water rather. And I will just talk real briefly about saffron. Saffron is the stamen from a particular kind of crocus. Out of each blossom comes 3 threads of saffron, and what makes saffron valuable is not only the difficulty of harvesting it, but it has a wonderful flavor and it lends a wonderful color to a dish. The way to get the most from saffron is to put warm water on it ahead of time, as I have done, to get the most flavor and color out of it. You want to be careful not to soak it in oil, because oil will encapsulate it and none of the color or the flavor can get out. If you take a look at your saffron and you see a lot of yellow threads, not red threads, but yellow threads, that's indicative of poor quality saffron. And if you find powdered saffron, usually that is a product that's trying to disguise the fact that it's a poor quality product. It's an expensive spice, likely one of the most expensive in the world, but a small amount goes a long way and it keeps pretty well. So don't be shy about finding it and using it both. All right, at this point, our fish is here, our vegetable bed is ready. We added saffron water. I'm going to add some olive oil. I'm going to put a little bit of more water in. And then finally, just a splash of lemon juice. This is going to cook in the oven. And what will make it go a little bit faster is if I put it on top of the stove and I bring it to a boil before I put it into the oven. Once it's at a boil, I'll put the lid on. And this should probably cook for about 25 to 30 minutes. The vegetables will become tender, the moisture will boil, create steam, that will cook the fish. The juices from the fish will mingle with the vegetable juices below, and this is everything in one pot. So while this comes up to a boil, let me show you how to make preserved lemons. You need a non-reactive jar. We're going to put a lot of salt, aggressive salt in here, so anything made out of metal typically will react with salt. I've got lemons, and what I want to do is take them and cut them top to bottom almost all the way through so that I can open them up like a little blossom. I'm going to take a little bit of salt and put it in there just to hold them open and then pack them into a jar. And then this last one, I may be able to fit a few more pieces in here. You want to pack them in fairly tight. There's one, and there's another, and that's going to be it. I can see that our fish is now at a boil, so Let's put the lid on. And I'm going to put this into the oven at about 375, and as I said, about 25 minutes. All right, back to our preserved lemons. I've got the lemons packed into the jar. I want to create a brine to pour over the top, and what that brine will do is draw all of the bitterness out of the rind. I usually use 2 parts water to 1 part salt by volume. So here is about 1.5 cups of salt, and to that I'll add about 3 cups of water. And we're just going to bring that up to a boil. Bring that up to a boil, and when it comes to a boil, I'll pour it over the top, and those will be set aside for about 6 weeks. At the end of 6 weeks, and this is at room temperature, you'll have something that looks like that. So here is a preserved lemon. One of the ways that you know they're done is that if you take your thumb and you push the flesh away from the rind, it should separate very, very easily. I'll do it again. You just push the flesh and it just separates easily from the rind. Just like that. So that's one indication of their being done. This you can squeeze the juice out of and add it back to the jar. There's another indication of doneness, and that is ordinarily this peel is white on the inside and kind of chalky looking. But if you take a look, this is translucent throughout. So that's how you can tell that this is done. Now this brine is just coming up right now, but when it's done, we'll pour it over that jar. Preserved lemons will keep very, very well for about a year in your refrigerator. They usually take about 6 weeks at room temperature and then move them into the refrigerator. The only challenge you might have is if somebody goes in here with dirty hands endlessly. If you see any mold beginning to grow on the top, just pour the brine off, boil it one time, and pour it back over the top. And you'll be good. Like I said, they keep well from 1 year to the next even. We're going to make one more dish, and this dish is a salad. Let me just introduce this salad by bringing up this beautiful selection of vegetables here. You likely know Greek salad, and this is a Greek salad deconstructed. A Greek salad is a great example of Mediterranean food because it is lots and lots of vegetable matter made palatable with a little bit of lemon juice and a little bit of olive oil and not much else. This has some feta cheese with it, which is a typical cheese in Greece. But where this Greek salad is going to depart from the one that you know is that we're going to take it and we're going to put it on top of a barley rusk. And I have those barley rusks here. This is whole grain barley baked into a bread, sliced and then allowed to dry or baked until it's completely dry. We're going to rehydrate those barley rusks just by pouring some water over the top of them and letting them sit a little bit in that water. I'm going to also put some lemon juice in just so we don't rob it of flavor. And I think we could get away with just a little bit more water. Now, I turn the barley rusks in the water until I feel them beginning to soften. I don't want them to fall apart completely. I want them just to begin to soften. And when they get there, then I will pull them out and let them continue to rehydrate out of the water. I don't want them to become too soggy. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. All right, these I think are good. As soon as they soften enough for me to push my finger into them, that's probably when they should come out. Right over here, our brine is boiling. So let's pour it over these lemons. I'm going to do it in the sink just so that if I spill a little bit, it's not the end of the world. There we are. I'll set those aside. They need to sit at room temperature now for about 6 weeks, and when the flesh pushes away and the rind is translucent, then you know they're done. All right, onwards. Let's turn this into a Greek salad. A Greek salad for me is olive oil. A Greek salad for me is red wine vinegar. And I like a little bit of lemon juice in there as well. I'm going to add some oregano. This is dried Greek oregano. And we'll season that with salt. And we'll season it with pepper. And I've got some garlic that I want to put in. Maybe you've seen this trick before, but if you haven't, just cover it and smash it. And then you can chop it very, very quickly and easily. I'm even going to take the side of my knife and turn this into a paste. All right. The garlic goes in as well. And we can build this salad. Olives, cucumbers, red onions, plenty of these beautiful tomatoes, capers, and feta cheese. I think we can probably use every last bit of it. You toss that salad together. That's a Greek salad. But if I were to taste it, it's probably a good idea to taste it. We want to make sure that it's got a good flavor. A little more olive oil, still a little sharp. If I were to stir this up and let it sit, it would begin to bleed out a little bit of moisture. In fact, you can see some of it already on the bottom of the bowl. That's where this bread comes in, because this barley rusk will absorb all of that flavor. So, what I want you to do is grab a bowl, and we'll take the rusks. At this point, they're fairly soft, and I'm just going to break them up, break them in half. They've rehydrated very nicely. And we're going to spoon not just the salad, but the liquid below the salad onto these barley rusks. We want them to absorb the flavor of this salad. In addition, they provide plenty of fiber and whole grain, so it's a win-win situation. I'm going to put a few more in here. And then this salad can sit very, very happily on your buffet or in your kitchen for an hour or two until you're ready to eat. And it won't be soupy because the barley rusks are there drinking up all the rest of the liquid. All right, so there's one of our dishes done. We have preserved lemons. I want you to be able to be reminded of those. Our fish is in the oven, and we should pull that out and see how it's looking. So our fish has just come out of the oven. It's been there for about 35 minutes, and the fish is cooked. The vegetables are tender now, and there's a broth in the bottom that has the color of saffron and tomatoes. Before you serve this, I think it's a good idea just to taste that broth. And if you decide it needs more salt or it needs a little bit more lemon, then you can add it. But this tastes great to me. So I'm going to put this over here. I love the idea of serving it right out of the pan that it cooked in. And that's the way they do it traditionally in Morocco. They cook it in a special pot called a tagine. So 2 separate dishes. The salmon tagine with shaved vegetables which is all about lots of vegetables, compelling flavor, a small amount of seafood, and just deliciousness. And then over here to go with it, a Greek salad that has paxamadia, or the barley rusks, that lend a certain amount of nutritional credence to this salad. It's nutritionally a powerhouse as it is, but adding the whole grains in the form of barley, I think, just takes it right over the top. And these are indicative of healthy cooking in the Mediterranean. So I want to leave you with a really simple fruit salad for dessert. This is a date and orange salad that is popular in North Africa. And in North Africa, they wouldn't eat it as a dessert, but likely they'd eat it at the beginning of the meal. So let me get started. Now, in North Africa, they would eat this at the beginning of the meal as a part of what they call meze. Those are the small dishes that they use to begin a meal with. We relegate sweetness to the end of the meal because oftentimes we drink wine with our food, which they do not. And wine doesn't like sweet food. So some slices of orange. Let's put some orange segments on as well. And I'm going to add to the mix some dates. I want to season this with a little bit of cinnamon. So just a pinch and around we go. And I'm also going to add some toasted almonds to this. And I've got an optional ingredient. You may or may not want to add it. This is orange flower water. This is the distilled essence of orange blossoms. So to add this to the salad, to some people it's not to their taste. It's a little bit like kissing their grandmother and getting that little bit of perfume in their mouth. But when you think about it, this tells a flavor story that starts with the blossom of the orange, and then the fruit forming, the fruit ripening, and a drop or two, I think, is a nice idea. So I'm going to put some on. Be very, very careful that you don't overdo it. Just like that. Just a drop or two is really all that's called for. And then to brighten this plate up, I'm going to take some mint and cut it into very, very fine ribbons. And we'll add that onto the salad as well. And that will be that. I can imagine really enjoying this salad as a dessert, even though in North Africa they might enjoy it early in a meal. That's all there is to it. You want to emphasize fresh, regional, seasonal fruits and vegetables, minimally processed fruits and vegetables, and leverage it to draw people to your table and feed them really compelling and, at the same time, healthy food.